Welcome back to The Source. One of my favorite subjects is gun control. I'm not talking about steady aim. I'm talking about government attempts to limit our right to self-defense. And joining me now from Washington, D.C. is perhaps the world's foremost scholar on what's called Second Amendment rights in the United States, Professor John Lott. Thanks for joining us today, Professor.
Oh, great to talk to you again, Ezra.
Well, I love having you on. And just as a reminder for guests who didn't catch your last appearances, you're the author of More Guns, Less Crime and the Bias Against Guns. Now, you're joining us today to talk about breaking news in the United States about something called Operation Fast and Furious. Just take a minute, if you would, Professor, and refresh our viewers' memory. What is Operation Fast and Furious?
Right. Well, it's something that's been in the news for the last year in the United States. Since the beginning of the Obama administration, they've been making a big deal about claims about U.S. guns going down to Mexico and supposedly being used in drug gangs down there. And there is a small percentage of the guns that they have there. But what the scandal involves is that the Obama administration actually has ordered gun dealers to sell guns to people who they thought were connected with drug cartels.
So they ordered the gun stores to sell to suspected bad guys. Is that, am I simplifying too much? Like they said, you must sell this?
No, that's exactly right. The gun stores would call up saying, we think we have some pretty bad guys who are trying to buy guns here. We don't want to sell them. And the Obama Justice Department would say, we want you to go and sell the guns to these people.
Now, what had
happened was...
Go ahead.
Yeah. What had changed was the Bush administration would allow the sales to go through, but then they would arrest the people as soon as they'd leave the stores. But the Obama administration scrapped that and allowed the guns to actually be brought into Mexico. The claim was that, well, we'll find out where the illegal guns are going and we'll be able to track them. But they never did anything to track them. The agents that were involved said, look, we have no tracking devices on it. We have no agents who are going with these guns. We're just selling them to these members of this drug cartel, and they're disappearing into Mexico. The next thing we know, they're used in some crime someplace, but we're not tracing them at all. In fact, one ATF agent was so upset about the fact that his superiors weren't responding to his concerns, he went to a Radio Shack store to try to make his own bug to put on the weapons that were being sold so he could track them with the GPS. But the battery life was too short to do anything useful with it. But what's happened is that some whistleblowers got upset. They were seeing crimes being committed. There was an ATF agent who was in fact killed and a border agent who was killed by some of these illegal guns. Relatives of high Mexican officials have been killed with these guns. So the Mexican government's been very upset. And so there have been some congressional hearings on this since the Republicans took over at the beginning of the year.
Now that's what that's sort of the story so far. But we've got news now that this has actually reached the White House for the first time, and there's been a political casualty. Can you tell us what the new news is about this cockamamie scheme to sell guns to criminals?
Well, there's been about 9 people who were involved in this who have been reassigned to new jobs. More than half, 5 of these people have ended up with promotions. 4 of these people have been moved around to other positions. One, Kenneth Melson, who was the acting head of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, was reassigned to another place in Justice. He's probably the only person that you could say technically has had a demotion in this. But nobody's been fired. And the Obama administration's making a big deal about the fact that they've removed these people from their original jobs, but they don't explain why most of these people have gotten promotions. And they won't answer questions about how the whistleblowers were actually threatened with their jobs. It's not exactly clear that the administration is sending the right message when they give promotions to the people who were handling this, refuse to answer questions about the political appointees that signed off on this policy, and punish the people who were the whistleblowers.
Huh. Well, I'm glad you clarified. I thought that that acting head of the ATF, that's the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency, I thought he was sacked. You're just saying he was given another job in government, and I did not know that the malfeasors were given promotions. That's crazy time. So I stand corrected. There hasn't been a political comeuppance. There hasn't been a moment of accountability. Are these congressional hearings into Operation Fast and Furious, are they continuing?
Yes, no, they're continuing. I mean, they've been trying since the beginning of the year to get the Obama Justice Department to say who signed off on this, because there's a lot of coordination between agencies. You have the FBI, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the Drug Enforcement Administration. All of them have been involved to varying degrees in this program. It's recently come out that there have been federal officials not only in Arizona and Texas, but they found out recently in Florida that have been involved in this. So it's pretty obvious that some higher ups in the Justice Department were signing off on this. But Eric Holder and others have refused to answer questions about who actually signed off.
You know,
and they.
Professor, let me ask a big, dumb question. I mean, what was the idea? I mean, what was the theory? Put yourself in the shoes of the ATF. I mean, let's acknowledge they didn't execute this well. There were a lot of, they didn't do obvious things like track the guns. What was the idea? Like, if you were trying to put the absolute best spin, benefit of the doubt on it, what the hell were they actually even trying to do? Let alone the fact they did it so disastrously. What were they up to?
Right. Well, I mean, as I said, they changed the Bush policy, which was to arrest people when they bought these guns. And the idea was to have some type of tracking to find out how the cartels got their guns.
But no one thought to track it. I mean, how can you say we're going to change it to add tracking, but forget to add tracking? Like, that just sounds too big and too dumb a mistake to be a mistake. I mean, how can you say we're going to change the Bush policy and track them and just forget that last half of the sentence?
Right. Well, I suppose conspiracy theory people would go and say this policy started at the same time that the Obama administration was making claims about the number of guns from the U.S. going to Mexico. And somebody would say, well, maybe they just wanted to make sure more guns would go there so they could go and then call for new gun control laws. The problem is the Obama administration's refusing to answer questions about why they didn't put tracking devices on these guns. Until they answer it, I guess people who believe in these conspiracy theories are going to have a field day on this. It would be, I assume, they must have just not thought this through very carefully, and they should explain why they had this disconnect. What we do know from testimony before Congress is the agents that were involved told their higher-ups, and those people told the people above them that there was no actual tracing going on these guns, and all we were doing was giving guns to these drug gangs.
Crazy time.
Someplace, somebody higher up in the food chain was either asleep or they just didn't care what they were being told.
Wow, geez. This story's not over yet. I mean, it sounds like they're still rearranging deck chairs and trying to cover up. Frankly, I hope you'll keep us posted. Professor John Lott, world foremost scholar in Second Amendment rights, thanks for joining us today from Washington, D.C.
Great talking to you.